What up guys, my name is Eric, this is Racing Ram Fam. Today we're going to be taking my 98 Dodge Ram 1500 twin turbo 5.2 liter Magnum drag truck, and we're going to be taking out that stock dash right here and installing these awesome motor meter racing fully digital gauges. Pressure, she's good. We're gonna build a custom instrument bezel out of aluminum, and we're gonna mount these digital gauges. So in our digital gauges we got here, we have tach, speedometer, coolant temp, oil pressure, battery voltage, and fuel level. So everything that comes in the kit is the actual gauges, and then we get all the sensors and wiring that we need to actually put these gauges in. We are going to mount them in the factory location, so we're going to be throwing this guy away and building a custom aluminum one to mount the gauges in our stock dash in our Ram, since it's in such good shape without it being cracked and everything. So it'll be right here. A lot of the wiring will be super simple because we'll be just using the factory wiring that's already ran to the cluster itself. We are running this because we have the MS3 Pro Evo on this truck, which is an aftermarket ECU, so it is not running on a stock JTEC engine controller. It is fully aftermarket. This thing is awesome, but we need some gauges. So we're going to start this video in. We're going to get this plasma cut out, start lining up the gauges, start drilling some holes, and then we'll start wiring this guy in. So before I get too carried away with cleaning up the edges and stuff, we're going to lay out the gauges actually on the aluminum panel and figure out what order we want to do them in and how they're going to fit perfectly in here. And then these tabs right here will be bent, and then actually like bent twice for the actual feet of the instrument cluster, because you can see how deep these are. And it's at an actual angle. It's not perfectly flat across. And I want this to look clean as I can make it. So before I go crazy on cleaning up all these edges and everything, we're gonna start laying out the gauges on here and figure out the order that we like. So we got them laid out here. We marked center of the actual little dash piece we made, and we're gonna line them up. This is kind of how I think we're gonna do the order. So we have like the speedometer, and then the tach, and then we have like coolant temp, voltage, fuel level, and oil pressure all right there. So it's kind of laid out just like the factory one is, how that is, besides they have a giant fuel level gauge where the tach usually is, and then the fuel level gauge is usually small over here in the corner, and that's kind of how I'm mimicking it. So you know, the most important thing is probably the tach. We do have that gigantic tach with the light on it too, but we'll probably be removing that tach. That thing's kind of obnoxious and huge, and we'll probably just run the sleek little tach right here. One really cool thing about these gauges too is look how shallow they are. They're extremely shallow, so they fit perfectly in tight places. I think that's awesome though, because of how shallow they are, because that'll make it easier for it to fit in there and not run into plastic in the back. The less we'll have trimming to do because of how shallow they are. I don't think we'll have any trimming to do, to tell you the truth, because they are such a shallow mount gauge, which makes it awesome, because usually you get those bulky gauges which take a ton of room in the back, but these don't do that. The other awesome thing that Motor Meter Racing has done for us is actually in their cardboard little cutout right here, you know, they put the gauges in for display, but you know what works perfect? Lining it up. So those big holes I don't have a hole saw big enough for, so we're actually gonna have to plasma cut out these two big holes. These little holes we'll actually use a hole saw and hole saw it out, but that setup right there makes it 10 times easier to make sure we have a precise size on what hole we're gonna actually plasma cut out. So we're no guesswork, because we have all the sizes right there, right in the display with the gauges. It's the little things, I guess, guys. It's really the little things. So we just finished the one gauge on here, and look how sweet that looks, guys. So I'm gonna sit here with my die grinder and get all these gauges to fit perfectly. This is like a perfect fit, and she is tight and is gonna work great. I'm pumped about that. That looks sick. Look how beautiful this thing has turned out. Look at this thing. That's gonna look sick in the dash of Whitey. Look at that. I'm gonna be able to stare at some beautiful gauges the whole time I'm driving it, and I'm pretty pumped about that. So we're gonna start bending these tabs now, drilling some holes, and getting this actually in the dash itself, and then we'll start wiring up these gauges. The other cool thing about the speedometer is it's GPS based, so these gauges can go in anything you want. Boats, cars, trucks, motorcycles, ATVs, go-karts, anything. It's unlimited amount of possibilities. I think this would look pretty sick in my lawnmower. No, it's gonna be awesome in Whitey, and I'm so pumped to have some digital gauges and actually be able to see like coolant temp and oil pressure. You know, we went drag racing. We didn't make a video about it because we didn't do too hot, but we had no gauges when we went racing, and we didn't know what oil pressure was, but it ran the whole time, so who really cares? Alright, take a look at that, guys. That is way too cool. That looks sweet. We should try putting the bezel on here quick just to see what it looks like with the bezel on. It is kicked out a little bit though because there are alignment tabs on this thing that we don't have the holes drilled for yet. But just look at that. That's pretty dope. It matches our aluminum gauge panel right there, so it'll go great. And then we'll put an aluminum panel right here and this will be where our line lock is and maybe some other things. So we got everything from this kit laid out right here. We got all our digital gauges. We have the mounts for the two big gauges. All the little mounts are in the actual packaging of themselves. We got a fuel level sensor, and we got a float for it. We got a GPS signal for the speedometer. What else we got? Oil pressure sensor right there, wiring, water temp sensor and wiring, voltage gauge and wiring, the tachometer wiring, miscellaneous brackets, miscellaneous pipe fittings and adapters to get it to the oil pressure sensor and for the coolant temp sensor, more brackets, clamp-on mounts just in case you want to like hang it on a pillar or something like that for the gauges. So this is a totally complete kit. All we're gonna have to do is install this oil pressure sensor, which is perfect because that's 1/8 inch MPT, and that's what factory 5259s have right there. So it'll just be pulling out the factory one and threading in this new one. We got all the gauges installed into our custom gauge panel that we made out of aluminum. We got the oil pressure sensor installed. You can see the wiring right here. The one that's supplied with the kit is perfect. It's 1/8 inch MPT, which the factory is 1/8 inch MPT, so it works out great. But we do have all the gauges in place, and we do have the powers and grounds wired in. We just don't have the sensor wires wired in yet. But we did this big bulky connector, so everything's just one connector instead of all the little connectors on the back of the gauges. Super simple to install, power ground and ignition ground, but we do have our little test leads hooked up so we can see what it looks like when it fires up. Boom. Full digital gauges, isn't that sweet? Look at them. Well, the battery voltage is working, 11.9 volts. Of course our water temp ain't working because nothing's hooked up. Fuel level not working, nothing hooked up. Oil pressure, nothing working because it's not hooked up. Yeah, so here's our speedometer and our tachometer, but we can change the gauge colors of them. So we could do all blue to match, just like that. So they're all blue, just like that. They're fully sweeping, as you can see when we actually RPM and everything. We still have the protector shields on here, so if it looks a little funky, that's why, so we don't scratch them. So I'm gonna get this fully wired in and we'll get it thrown into the dash and we'll start up the truck and try them all out. We got the GPS sensor. It is magnetic base, and we're just setting it on our A-pillar for right now until we get the roll cage installed. We'll probably move that. I will double side stick tape it somewhere where it's gonna stay permanently. But for right now, it's just gonna chill right there. So we did a quick test fit, and then we pulled it back out, and I got it kind of taped up so it looks nice and professional. And then on the inside, I did the same thing, taped it up. The only thing I found out though is our factory coolant temp sensor, due to the fact that we're using it for the mega squirt, it makes the mega squirt freak out, because I'm gonna guess this puts out 12 volts, that puts out 12 volts, and then the sensor grounds it, and depending on coolant temp, it's a certain resistance to ground. Whatever voltage has left is what the temperature is. So I think we're going to use this as a transmission temp gauge instead of a coolant temp gauge. because it came with a sensor, and we already have a coolant temp gauge. And whenever we drive this truck, the laptop, I'm going to build a laptop mount on it, and we have a gauge set on the laptop that has coolant temp, so we'll probably just use that and use this as a transmission temp gauge instead of a coolant temp gauge. But everything else works, so we're going to slap this guy in and then start the truck up and show you guys what it looks like. Boom, they already look sick without even turning. That looks so cool. Looks like a freaking jet airplane. Because we're going so fast with Whitey. Yes. We have it set to 6500. Shift light too. But, yeah, so let's turn the key on and actually take a look at these gauges. Okay, that's pretty sick. So you can see our fuel level gauge is working, 22%, 23%. Our water temp gauge, again, we don't have it wired in, so it's not on. 11.7 battery voltage, 0 psi of oil pressure because it's not running, 0 RPM, and 0 miles per hour. So let's get this baby fired up, laptop hooked up, and let's fire up and see if she works. All right, we got the laptop up, and you guys can see, where's my coolant temp? Oh, coolant temp's right there. It's also right there. So maybe we'll get like a little digital dash or something right there. I don't know. But this looks sweet. And you can change the color of these guys. I don't know. I kind of like this teal look to it though. Blue. Match them all blue. I don't know. I kind of like that teal look better though. I like that. That looks sweet. And when we turn the lights on. Ooh, that's sweet. When you turn the lights on, they go red. That's awesome. I'm gonna sit here and play with this for the next 3 hours. That's awesome. All right, let's start this pig up. Oil PSI 57 PSI, RPM's 2100. I think that's a little off. We're gonna have to adjust that. Adjust that gauge a little bit because we're only at like 900 RPMs. That's saying 1900, which they have adjustments on the back for it. This drives me nuts. Oil pressure, she's good. Alright guys, I hope you like that. Rev up a Whitey. These gauges are sick. They're actually really sweet. Like, they're fully digital, and that's so sweet. We will go back and adjust the actual tack output on the back of it. We must have it set to the wrong one and get it down to the accurate setting. If you guys want to pick up a set of these Motor Meter Racing digital gauges, the link will be down in the description below. They're super awesome. You can put them in anything you want. They look sweet. I mean, how can you not love that? Like, that is 500 times better than the factory dash. Like, look how sweet that looks. This is the angle I look at it when I'm sitting in the seat, so you guys can see how awesome these are. And then they turn red when you turn the lights on. I think that's just, it's just so cool. And I'm so pumped. I'm so ready to go racing. Whitey's sounding like a beast. He sounds like a monster. But as always, guys, keep it boosted. If you have any questions about the gauge install, please comment down below. Thank you for watching. As always, keep it boosted, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace!